There is something about Keanu Reeves that has always stayed with me, something that goes beyond his movies and his fame. In a world where celebrities often seem untouchable and distant, Keanu feels like a friend you have never met but somehow already know. He has lost so much in his life: his best friend to an overdose, his daughter who was stillborn, his girlfriend in a tragic car accident, yet he moves through the world with a gentleness that most people cannot even comprehend. He gives away millions to film crews without telling anyone. He takes pay cuts so other actors can be hired. He sits alone on benches eating sandwiches and never complains about the life he has been given. When I think about what it means to be truly kind, truly humble, truly human, I think about Keanu Reeves. And today I want to share a story with you, a story about something most people never noticed, something that happened quietly, away from the headlines, but changed the way I understand what it means to really see another person. The morning light came slowly through the windows of a small hotel room in Amman, Jordan, and something in the air felt different. It was not something you could name or point to, just a shift, a feeling that the day ahead would not be like the days before. Charlize Theron sat on the edge of her bed, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes watching the dust particles float through the pale sunlight. She had been awake for hours but had not moved, as if her body was waiting for something her mind could not yet understand. There was a quietness in her chest, not peaceful but heavy, the kind of quietness that comes before something changes forever. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, and somewhere in that vastness, a story was waiting to begin. 6 years earlier, a script called The Last Border had been written by a woman named Marin Okilo. Marin had grown up in a refugee camp in Kenya before earning a scholarship to film school in New York, and she had poured every memory, every heartbreak, every moment of hope and despair into those pages. The story was about two humanitarian workers stationed at a refugee camp on the edge of a forgotten war zone, two people who had given everything to help others and had slowly lost their faith that any of it mattered. Every studio in Hollywood had rejected it. Too slow, they said. Too bleak. No franchise potential. But Marin refused to give up. She sent the script to Keanu Reeves with a handwritten letter that said simply, "I am not asking you to play a hero. I am asking you to play a man who does not know if goodness matters anymore but does it anyway. I think you understand that, man." Keanu said yes within 24 hours. For the role of Lena, the South African doctor who had spent 11 years at the camp and had stopped believing in anything except the next patient in front of her, Marin wanted only one person: Charlize Theron. When Marin called her, Charlize was hesitant. She had stopped making quiet films because she believed they did not change anything. But Marin said something that stayed with her. She said, "This film will change something, but only if you and Keanu are in the same frame." When Charlize asked why, Marin explained that Keanu was the only actor in the world who could make silence feel like a conversation. Charlize thought about that for a long time, and then she said yes. They began filming in Jordan, in a real decommissioned refugee camp that still held the echoes of thousands of lives that had passed through it. Marin had insisted on practical locations because she wanted the actors to feel the dust in their throats and the weight of the place in their bones. On the first day of shooting, Charlize arrived on set in worn cargo pants and a faded medical vest, no makeup, her hair unwashed and pulled back. She had spent 3 weeks with Doctors Without Borders preparing for the role, and she carried herself like someone who had performed triage too many times to count. Keanu arrived carrying 2 coffees. He handed one to Charlize without a word, as if they had known each other for years, as if this was simply what he did every morning. Charlize was surprised, and when she thanked him, he simply smiled that quiet, slightly sad smile of his and walked to his mark. The crew noticed something immediately, something none of them had ever seen before. Keanu Reeves, the man who treated every single person on every single set with exactly the same gentle respect, was paying attention to Charlize in a way that felt different. It was not romantic attention or starstruck fascination. It was something closer to recognition, as if he had been waiting his whole life to meet someone who understood something he could never explain. Around Charlize, the gentle fog that seemed to surround Keanu lifted. His eyes sharpened. He laughed louder. He asked real questions instead of polite ones. He challenged her, and she challenged him right back. The first scene they filmed together was deceptively simple. Keanu's character James sits outside the medical tent at dawn, drinking powdered coffee from a tin cup. Charlize's character Lena emerges after an all-night surgery on a 7-year-old boy who stepped on a landmine. She sits beside him. Neither speaks for almost 2 minutes. Then James says, "Did he make it?" And Lena says, "Define make it." That was all the script gave them, but when Marin called action, something happened that made the entire crew go still. Keanu shifted almost imperceptibly, turning his body toward Charlize, softening his shoulders, changing his breathing. Without moving more than an inch, he became completely oriented toward her, as if his whole body was saying, "I see you and I am not going anywhere." And Charlize responded to it. She did not play Lena as tough or broken. She played her as someone exhausted from pretending she was neither. When she delivered her line, her voice was perfectly steady, and that steadiness was devastating because it contained the sound of a woman who had cried so many times she had simply run out of tears. Marin did not call cut for 90 seconds after the last line. She was crying. The sound engineer was crying. A grip who had been working on film sets for 30 years and had seen everything was crying. When Marin finally said cut, Keanu turned to Charlize and said quietly, "That was the best acting I have ever been in a room with." Charlize stared at him and replied, "You were not acting either." Keanu looked away toward the desert and said, "No, I was not." As the weeks passed, the crew became witnesses to something they struggled to describe. Keanu and Charlize were not having an affair. There were no stolen glances or whispered conversations that stopped when others approached. But on camera and in the moments just before and after the camera rolled, something extraordinary was happening. Keanu, who was the same with everyone, was not the same with Charlize. The fog lifted. He became present in a way that felt almost startling, as if every other interaction in his life was conducted through a protective barrier, and around her, that barrier disappeared. And Charlize, who could command any room with the force of her will, became quieter around Keanu. Not smaller, never smaller, but more precise. She stopped performing and started existing. She let silences breathe. She let her face do nothing and discovered that nothing was enough. One evening, sitting outside her trailer in the cooling desert air, Charlize tried to explain it to Marin. She said, "He makes me braver. Not because he pushes me, but because he is so still that I can hear myself think. Most people are so loud inside that you have to shout to be heard over their noise. Keanu is quiet inside. And when you are next to someone that quiet, you can finally hear your own truth." She paused and then added, "I have never worked with anyone like him." The climax of the film was a scene Marin had rewritten 14 times. The camp is being evacuated. A ceasefire has collapsed, and James and Lena have 12 hours to move 400 people across 20 miles of open desert to the next safe zone. But there is a problem. 17 unaccompanied children, orphans whose parents were killed in the initial conflict, have no documentation. Without papers, they cannot cross the border, and the bureaucrats will not budge. James wants to forge documents. Lena wants to go to the border herself and physically refuse to leave until the children are let through. They are standing in the medical tent, surrounded by empty cots, and they are supposed to be screaming at each other. But on the day of shooting, Keanu came to Marin with a problem. He said James would not scream. He explained that James was not a screaming man, that he was a man who got quiet when he was terrified. Right now, Keanu said, James is terrified of losing her. If she goes to that border and gets killed, he loses the only person in the world who really sees him. He would rather risk everything than lose that. But he would not shout about it. He would get quieter. Marin asked what he would do instead, and Keanu said he would say the same lines but say them like a man holding a grenade with the pin pulled, and the grenade was his heart. Charlize understood immediately. She said Lena would scream because she was the opposite, because she got loud when she was terrified. She would scream because she knew he was right, because she had spent 11 years saving other people and was furious that someone was finally trying to save her. She did not know how to be the one who was saved. It felt like a cage. And then, Charlize said, Lena would stop screaming. In the silence, they would look at each other, and they would both know. They would know they were going to do both plans. He would forge the documents and she would go to the border. They would do everything because that was what you did when the world had taken everything from you except one person. They shot the scene in one take. Charlize screamed with a fury that shook the tent walls. She threw a metal tray. She called James a coward, a fraud, a man who hid behind kindness because he was too afraid to fight. And Keanu stood there. He stood absolutely still, his arms at his sides, his eyes never leaving hers, absorbing every word like a man standing in a rainstorm who had decided not to run. When she finally stopped, her chest heaving, her voice ragged, he said his line. Just one line. He said, I am not trying to save you. I am trying to deserve you. He said it so quietly that the boom operator had to check if the microphone had picked it up. It had. The silence after lasted 11 seconds. In those 11 seconds, Charlize's face traveled from fury to shock to grief to wonder to something beyond love, beyond gratitude, beyond recognition. It was the face of a woman realizing she had been seen fully and completely for the first time in her life. The final act of the film is nearly wordless. James forges the documents in a cramped supply closet. Lena drives to the border and refuses to move, sitting in front of the gate with 17 children gathered around her. The clock ticks. And then James arrives on foot, having walked 8 miles through the desert because the second vehicle broke down. He is sunburned and dehydrated and barely standing, but he hands the forged papers to the border official with the quiet confidence of a man who has decided that decency is not optional. The official looks at the papers, looks at the children, looks at Lena covered in dust with a 4-year-old girl sleeping against her chest, looks at James swaying on his feet but with eyes that are clear. The official stamps the papers. One by one, the children cross. And when the last child, a boy of about 9 with a scar across his forehead, crosses, he turns and looks back at James and Lena with eyes that say, I will remember you for the rest of my life. The film premiered at Venice and received an 11-minute standing ovation. It eventually raised over $40 million for refugee education and built schools in 4 countries. But the real story happened away from the cameras. Keanu and Charlize did not become a couple. They became something rarer. They became 2 people who had witnessed each other. They called on birthdays and sent books they thought the other would like. When Charlize's mother was hospitalized, Keanu sent a 3-page handwritten letter that she kept in her bedside drawer. When Keanu went through a period of deep depression, Charlize flew to his house and sat on his porch without saying a word for 2 hours, then made him soup and left. A journalist once asked Keanu about it directly, asking if it was true that he was different around Charlize. Keanu paused for almost 30 seconds before answering. He said, I am not different around her. I am just more. She makes me more of what I already am. Most people see the version of you that you have learned to show. Charlize sees the version you are afraid to show. And she is not afraid of it. That is a very rare thing. When the journalist asked what Charlize was afraid of, Keanu smiled and said she was afraid of the same thing everyone is afraid of, that if someone sees all of you, the fire and the ash, they will walk away. The journalist asked if he walked away, and Keanu said, "Why would I have the ashes where things grow?" This story stays with me because it teaches something that I think we all need to hear. Kindness is not weakness. It is not a strategy or a brand. It is a choice you make every single day to see the person in front of you as a full human being with their fire and their ash, their noise and their silence, their armor and the soft terrified thing the armor is protecting. Most of us spend our lives waiting to be seen, building walls and hoping someone will climb them, performing versions of ourselves and praying someone will love the real thing underneath. Keanu and Charlize found that in each other, not romance, not performance, but witness. The simple act of saying "I see you and I am not looking away." I believe that is what we are all searching for. Not someone to save us but someone to witness us. Someone who sees our worst day, our worst self, our worst fear, and says "I am still here." That is the kind of kindness that changes lives. That is the kind of respect that builds schools and saves children and reminds us why we are here. Keanu Reeves does not act different around Charlize Theron. He just stops acting. And maybe that is the greatest lesson of all. Maybe the bravest thing any of us can do is stop acting and let someone see us as we really are. Maybe that is where everything beautiful begins.